When was the last time you took a leap of faith, trusting that everything is going to work out? Do you crave growth, or are you merely content with the status quo? If you want more out of your life, out of your career, and out of your relationships, you are in the right place. Take the leap and discover how to create a life by design rather than living it by default. Real success starts with you. Now here's your host, Colleen Biggs.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Take the Leap. As always, I am your host, Colleen Biggs. We have a really big treat for you today. The world has changed a lot over the last few years, and I know there's some uncertainty out there still. And I have Tonya Dawn Rekla with me today, and we are going to be diving into how to reclaim your superpower. She's like the queen of superpowers. So you're going to love everything she has to say today, her experience, everywhere that she's been, what she's been through. She's a phenomenal female. She has the most generous, loving, inviting energy I've ever met in my life. And I cannot wait to bring her to the forefront and introduce her to you today. But before we get to Tonya, I would love to thank and celebrate our sponsor of today's show, No Problem Parenting, who was actually just featured in Minnesota on Channel 9 of the morning show last week. Are you frustrated with your kids? Do you constantly worry about them? Or maybe you're just sick and tired of dealing with their misbehaviors in your home? Well, have no fear. No Problem Parenting is here to help you turn around any emotional or behavioral problem into a no problem while strengthening your relationship with your kids at the same time. You don't have to be the bad guy to get your kids to behave. Join the No Problem Parenting community where you will find down-to-earth, practical, fun, no nonsense, and even backwards tips and ideas on how to deal with and overcome any parenting challenge. Go to noproblimparenting.com and get started now. Become the confident leader your kids crave you to be. I love No Problem Parenting because she is about being a leader for your parents and working with and flowing with your kids. And it was really great that she got to be on Channel 9 in Minnesota as well. So congratulations to her for showing up. Well, let me tell you about Tonya that is going to be our guest today. And is the executive director of Superpower Experts and the creator of the Superpower Network. Told you guys she's queen of superpower. The #1 podcast network for inspired personal development. Tonya Dawn Rekla spends her days proving superpowers are real. She's passionate about creating scalable, sustainable solutions to support rapid evolution and vibrational shifts for individuals and the collective. I'm telling you right now, Tonya, there's been a lot of vibrational shifts out there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's like the understatement of the decade.
Yeah. So first of all, welcome to the show. It's a
Thank
treat
you.
to have you here.
Oh, it's always a treat to be in your presence. And it's like hugging you, right? We get to be here locally, and it's nice to be able to be here together and sharing this wisdom. So thank you for the container.
Yeah, I'm so blessed to have you in my life. Tonya and I met just out of the blue at an in-person event back in April. We hugged each other right away. Her husband was with her. I gave him a big hug. And we just had this like connection of wanting to be in each other's space and energy. And she invited me to some venture cafe networking opportunities that were local that I started going to, meeting more people that now I'm collaborating with. And it's just been, you never know how one connection of a person you meet can really inspire your network and who you meet. So I want to thank you for that. So you created the Superpower Network. Why did you and your husband create that network? Where did you feel that there was a need? Tell us a little bit about where you've come from. I think that's important. And where you are today and why you created that.
Beautiful, beautiful question. Thank you for that. It's, it is kind of a story. And so in retrospect, it all makes sense, as a lot of things do in our lives. And so I can see it now, but I'll tell you, getting here was kind of a wonky road with some twists and turns along the way. So I got my start in academia in my college days in intercultural communication, and actually taught critical race theory which nobody knew about at the time, of course. And so it's become quite the topic. And that was really what got me on this trajectory of wanting to understand people, right? Wanting to understand myself, right? There were things I learned about myself that I had no idea that people held certain stereotypes or biases against me without ever having met me, right? And so it was really fascinating to kind of get that glimpse inside of myself and face it and look at it, right? And I had my run-ins with the gender politics of this world as well, with a couple not so nice incidents in my background, and covered that in one of my books, and really reconciling, why do we do some of the things that we do to each other? Like, why do we do them to ourselves? Why do we do them to each other? When at the end of the day, we all kind of want the same thing. We like to be loved. We like to be accepted. We like to be able to create and feel free to create in the way that lights us up. There's just basic things that we all sort of gravitate toward, but yet we act in all of these really kind of crazy ways that say otherwise. And so that guided me through my master's degree. And I graduated with that, and 9/11 happened. And so I enlisted in the military. I actually enlisted for counterintelligence and became a soldier in the counterintel field. And then later was recruited by an agency and did espionage, surveillance, and investigations. So it's all kind of wonky, right? Who gets to run around chasing spies and do advanced weapons training and like all this crazy stuff? So it sounds like a fanciful story. However, the continuity factor was always humans, right? The human component, understanding humans, right? You want to understand how to program humans, go to the military, right? They're incredibly good at it for very specific reasons, because they have to be for their mission, their purpose. Whether you agree with it or not, they're good at what they do. They're effective in that. And so I learned a lot about how we function at a base level, carried a lot of those solutions forward. Then Justin and I met teaching at the Counterintelligence Special Agent course. And we taught things like ego deconstruction and in-group, out-group dynamics, and thoughts become things, and the eye-brain connection, right, to counterintelligence agents. So you can imagine the world that we were in there. And that's about when the reawakening sort of started happening within me specifically. And a lot of my superpowers started to come back online in ways that were incredibly nerve-wracking and a little bit frightening to me. I didn't understand them. And I was in a very specific profession that doesn't really accept much out of the norm. And it was a bizarre kind of path to walk. I was very fortunate to have Justin in my life, who had done a lot of his own journeying, right? So here we were, two people kind of in this developmental journeying process, and kind of weird stuff started happening. Like I could hear things that I couldn't explain. I could feel things I couldn't explain. And then you start talking with people about it. It's like, everybody has these things. You're like, well, why aren't we talking about them? And so that's sort of, fast forward. Justin and I built a corporate counter intel firm and did due diligence and stuff. And in that process, discovered why people continue to repeat bad behaviors, especially in business, and what, how we can really put a stop to that. And so started exercising those techniques with certain clients, and it just started to evolve. And the next thing you knew, we were in the transformational business, helping people really understand themselves. And then marketing became a huge issue because we operate in some pretty high vibe spaces, talking about some things that most people don't think about on a day-to-day basis. And most of the demographic kind of categorization that marketing offered didn't fit for us. We didn't know how to sort for our people because we weren't even really sure who our people were. They just kind of kept finding us. And so the podcasting made a lot of sense. We felt drawn to it. And so we started about a 5-6 year beta test on the efficacy of podcasting in high vibrational business models specifically. So through all of that, we've spent a ton of time establishing the human energetic system and understanding that operating system, and teaching people how to be more effective in their energetic communication. So a little bit of a lengthy story, but that's how we got here.
Yeah. And that's crazy how you met Justin. I do believe everything happens exactly at the divine timing that it needed to happen, and how interesting that you were both on that development journey at the same time. You mentioned you wrote a book. Did you want to tell us a little bit about your book and why you wrote that book?
Sure, I'm happy to. The book actually really wrote me. It took about 3 days and it was out. It was very guided. My writings always are. And so that book in particular, it's actually the pink one right behind me. It's called War, Watch, Assess, React. and it's the ultimate guide to personal power and safety. And it was how I reconciled my own struggles with internal power versus external power. I was raped at 16 and again at 32. And at 32, I was on a national security surveillance mission, and it was a team member. And I could have killed the person. I could have done all kinds of things at that point in time in my life, and didn't. Right. I got up and went to work the next day because we were on mission. And when that happened, I decided that I should probably take a really hard look at myself, that I looked really good on paper. I was incredibly successful, but I was a mess inside, and nothing I had done helped that. I was still the 16-year-old girl somewhere inside of me. And that didn't sit well with me. It was an aspect that I couldn't explain. And it would emerge in ways that affected my effectiveness. And I was aware of it. And so I kind of took myself out of the game and started going inward.
Yeah. Would you say that part of the journey of reclaiming your superpower is really going within and working through, I don't want to say dealing with, but working through some of the things that you don't understand? Like you said, why was I not doing something about it at 32? I get 16 maybe, but 32, I don't understand why I wouldn't, when I have totally different training and I'm more mature than when I was 16. I believe there are a lot of individuals, and I'm sure you do too, walking around on earth today that have these internal struggles, these battles that are happening with who they show they are to the world and who they think they are behind the curtain.
Beautiful. For sure. And we as we've embarked on the podcast thing, we've had an incredible experience because we talk with all these people. I mean, since 2016, we've been asking people, what are your superpowers? And this is people, from retired Army generals all the way to like the woo-woo of the woo-woos, right? Like the recluses that don't even have signal, like try to get, a podcast out of someone who's won't get on digital, right?
Right.
So we've got the gamut here of people who not only had similar experience like what you're talking about. We all have that aspect, that undeveloped aspect inside of us until we learn how to work with it, right? Until we understand it better. And what we also found that we all have superpowers as well. And so once we started looking at this, because people are very aware of the discrepancy inside of themselves, right? The lowest of the low and the highest of the high. And reconciling those two is often very challenging. In fact, I would say that that's really, truly the game that we're all embarking on. How do we hold the both and? And we kind of introduced this middle part where you learn how to hold the both and. You learn that, yes, you are this. You are all of your stories. You are all of your experiences. And they can affect your behaviors, but they don't have to, because you're also in control of yourself. And you can train and you can get discipline. And by internalizing things like self-discipline, self-control, self-management, right? All of the things that make us feel confident and comfortable in the world, then we can start to explore ourselves from a different place, because we're not in the throes of those programs. Now, of course, as you can imagine, trying to distill this down into consumable bite-sized chunks was quite the walk. And so that's where CEFA came in, the creative energy field activation modality that we teach, because we needed something that people could use that they didn't have to understand, that would work for them, even when they didn't understand the complexities of the human operating system, which are incredibly complex. You start developing unifying theories and you realize just how complex we are at functional levels. And yet we're identical. And yet at the basic, essentially all we're doing is communicating mentally, emotionally, physically, and vibrationally. We send out energetic signals. We are responding to the world, and the world is responding to us because of the energetics. Once we kind of get that, because it's weird, it's like it's just space between us, right? But it's not. We're actually communicating in the space between us. And we know it. We all get it. Like, we've all had many, many experiences where we know something's going on, but since we don't understand it, we're not comfortable talking about it. But once we start talking about it, we see, oh, wait, it's not that big of a deal. Like, when I get upset, my program is to constrict, right? So I pull energy up out of me. That means that it's not as easy for somebody else to feel me. So they're figuring out what's going on, right? It sends an alert signal. All of us have a program that responds to alert signals, and on it goes. And once we get that at a mechanical level, it's like, oh, Well, I can just stop that signal. Yes, you can. And you can train your body not to react, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. We have to start with both looking at the wounds that we carry and also maybe not letting ourselves off the hook so easily and recognizing we're incredibly powerful too. And we
Yeah.
have the ability to overwrite them, right? To feel them, right? We're not talking about disassociating from them because you have to be willing to go back into them, but they're not what we think, right? It happened, right? The things happened. You're still here.
Yeah.
What it is just learning that we can go into those spaces and it doesn't have to be what we thought it was. However, if we're not trained, right, and if we don't know how to do that, and oftentimes when we go looking back at our past, it is still frightening because we revert back to that piece of us that experienced it at that time.
Yeah.
And so it is complex, and yet there are very, very, very simple techniques that I'm happy to share that can start you on the trajectory of feeling much more confident, in control, and tapping into your superpowers again. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
there's a level, just like you talked about, of punishment and shame,
That's
right? For
right.
things. And there's a lack of forgiveness. We will quickly forgive other people. Some of us will, some
Mhm.
won't. And then you got to hold on to that. Then you have to hold on to that, energy. When we don't forgive other people too, like the forgiveness isn't about really forgiving the sin or the action. It's about allowing yourself to let go of that.
That's right.
And I believe shame and punishment and forgiveness are things that, I mean, if we had bubbles over our heads every time we walked anywhere and people could see the bubble of what we were struggling with, everyone has a bubble
That's right.
full of things. And so judgment, it doesn't fall fine, with me, because I don't know what someone else's story is, or I don't know what their life has been like or what they've had to struggle with. And the respect of just the individual themselves that's in front of you, there's no need for us to do that judgment piece, but because they're already judging themselves, right?
That's
So
right.
the reclaiming your superpower piece, I love the superpower name and the word. Just saying superpower tells each one of us that we have the power to change. We have the power
Right.
to heal. We have the power to remove shame. We have the
That's
power to
right.
not punish ourselves. And I know there's, the only word I can think of, Tonya, is there's so many sad people in the world today that are really struggling. And how do we reach them? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here, but how do we help the people that don't know how to reclaim
That's right.
their superpowers, that are afraid, that are shameful, that are punishing themselves, that feel?
I love that question because that really is what drives us. Because at the end of the day, this is a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to sit in your own space and feel calm. It's a privilege to be able to sit in your own space and feel confident, to know that you're guided, to know that you're held, to know that you're supported, to know that you're whole no matter what happens in the world around you, that you're confident and comfortable in whatever transitions come, to include disembodiment, right? To include that ultimate transition. When you've made peace with all of that, it is an incredibly privileged position to sit in, and we acknowledge that. And so we took steps to make sure that we're addressing that. One was distilling it down into a process like CIFA that can be used, right? Taking it into organizations. We work with individuals, couples, and families in these spaces because everybody can change. Our organization alone offers so many free resources, so many ways of looking at things differently, so many opportunities to connect in. It takes a real willingness to start to pull yourself out of the stories that tell you otherwise, though. And that's the first thing we all get to face. The easiest way to do that is to surround yourself with others who are talking about it. We went over 5 million downloads monthly in 2020 with the network. 2021, 5 million downloads monthly on a network that no external marketing, right? None of us had platform, none of us had celebrity. It was simply the content that people are ready for, and they're listening and they're listening and they're listening. Now's the time that people are starting to take more action. And it's different action this time, because what we found during the pandemic is if it's not solidly founded, then we're not going to trust in it again, right? We
Yeah.
saw what happened to our foundations when we hadn't really vetted them very well. And so what we recommend is, at the end of the day, get good with yourself, right? Because whatever happens next, right? The fear is that we won't be ready, or that it'll be scary. And change is the new concept, right?
Yeah.
Getting comfortable in the shifting, right? Things aren't going to go back to the solidity and form that we once thought of. We're evolving. And there's a surrealness and an abstraction to this process that we have to get okay with. And it means letting go of those densities, right? The shame and the processes and just the heap of guilt that we pour on ourselves because we just simply didn't know better.
Mm-hmm.
We can make amends now, and we can say, okay, we know differently now. I can forgive myself for that, and I can forgive everyone else that was involved. How do we move forward? And we need to be able to get this stuff to the people who can use it, which is what our organization is doing. We offer variable pricing. We're improving equity and accessibility in our spaces. We're deeply inclusionary. We're doing all of the things that we want to see in the world that we want to live into.
Yeah. Tell the listeners more about how they can reach out to connect with you or be able to access some of these opportunities in SIFA.
For sure. So what I recommend is getting involved with the experience. That's the easiest way. So go to superpowerexperts.com and get signed up for the experience. It's a free virtual experience. It's a little taste. It will remind you of what it feels like to be in your power, right? And that's really important because we're not going to trust anybody else at this point in time. You got to have a direct experience with it. Come have a direct experience. You can participate as much or as little as you want. And I'll give you all a little tip to carry with you. The easiest way to navigate this world right now, the one thing you can do that will change your existence and your outlook, if you remember to do it, is simply soften your heart. Just soften your heart. You may still say the wrong words. You may still fumble. It may still be uncomfortable. But if we just soften our hearts, like Colleen was talking about, we all have our stuff, right? Just soften our hearts when we're talking, speak with softer voices, ask more questions, right? Be a little bit more curious before jumping to conclusions, and watch what happens. Just physically, literally, like imaginatively imagine your heart just softening around the edges, just softening with everybody you meet. Everybody, I don't care if it's a customer service call you're making. If you're really teed off about that account, that is a person. Somehow, some way, there's a person on the other end of that. And let's remember that and just soften our hearts. I mean, we have our 13-year-old who's our admin. So keep that in mind, right?
Yeah.
When you're lobbing off at companies or you're upset about this or that, you have no idea who's running these companies. You have no idea what they're going through, and you have no idea what's happening in their worlds, right?
Yeah,
soften our hearts, take a breath, right? Especially coming up on this holiday season, let's be a little bit more considerate and calm with each other. Come to the experience if you'd like to remember how to do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. What was that website again, Tonya?
Superpowerexperts.com.
Superpowerexperts.com. So for all of you watching the video, we have it in the details. For those of you listening on the podcast, we have it at your fingertips. So you can click on superpowerexperience.com. And you can also connect with Tonya on Facebook. She's on LinkedIn. We have every other social media link here for you to connect with her. And I highly recommend that you do. Her energy, her wisdom, and her knowledge is just bar none. And I love being in her presence. Both her and her husband, Justin, is amazing. It's like they're two peas in a pod. They're exactly the same. Their energy is the same, and how much respect they have, not only for themselves, for each other, but for other people. And I just want to thank you for that, Tonya, because I've really enjoyed, the time that we've been able to spend together. And I hope that all of you enjoyed the time that we got to spend together with Tonya today. And just remember, you're the only you that's ever been. You're the only you that will ever be. This is it. This is it. You're the only you. Yeah. So going inside, I love that you said soften your heart. I think respecting yourself, respecting others is a great place to start. And check out SIFA and what she has going on, her and Justin. And this is a great time in our lives and in the world today to be doing that and having more respect and love for other people. So Tonya, thank you so much for being on our show today and bringing the wisdom that you brought.
Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful container and the wonderful work you're doing too.
Yeah, appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, please never, never, never forget, be you and be strong. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed our show today, as our guests shared their secrets on designing their life by taking the necessary leaps to expand their influence and attract the right people and clients into their lives. To start these easy steps for yourself, be sure to visit www.colleenbiggs.net/freebies to download the 7 ways to increase your exposure today.